Okay, good evening. I would like to call this meeting of the Lunenburg School Committee to order. It is Wednesday, February 15th, and we are meeting in the LMS Collaborative Room. Number D132. We are learning about new technology. So I wasn't speaking into the microphone correctly. And in accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised this meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast within 24 hours over the Lunenburg Public Access channel. If you wish to join us with Zoom, I guess you must be joining us with Zoom, otherwise you wouldn't hear us, so I guess that's okay. But the Zoom number is 853-0575-7222. And I would say that should there be a technological problem with the Zoom portion of the program, with the new technology that we have been working on, the meeting will continue and you will need to come to the middle high school in order to participate. And let's see, the agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. So we would ask anyone who is able to stand, please, and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first matter of business is public comments. The school committee welcomes comments from the public. Comments addressing topics under the scope and authority of the school committee are welcome at either public comment session. Please remember, this is public comment, not discussion, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Each public comment section has a maximum of 10 minutes. Comments about individual students are prohibited by state and federal law. So have we public comments this evening? Certainly. You need to come up to the microphone. Yes, please. And state your name and address, please.
My name is Darrell Plant, and I live at 490 Lancaster Ave. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This past Saturday, the superintendent made the equity audit report available. While my wife was looking for its release, she came upon another recently completed report, the tiered focused monitoring report prepared by the Department of Education with the help from the superintendent. We have not heard of any discussion of this report and wondered if the school committee has addressed and implemented it. I read these two reports with the experience of the mandatory SEL program in mind. Then it came to me, the fundamental transformation of Lunenburg schools has not just begun. No, it actually started years ago when the superintendent was hired with the help of this school committee. I did my own deep dive into these reports. There is a lot there, so I will try to unpack it for you. The main takeaways from the equity audit were as follows. 1, use of correct pronouns is critically important to the overall learning environment. 2, the LGBTQIA community and other students have experienced some bullying and don't feel part of the school community. 3, students have not been appropriately challenged or physically exercised. 4, teachers do not feel like they have a voice because of the boot on their necks. 5, high achievement, high test scores, sports, and extracurricular activities are most important to teachers, staff, and parents. My overall analysis, we did not need to spend tens of thousands of dollars, taxpayer dollars, on this study. I think most people understand these things. The school committee should try to get its money back. Next, the tiered focused monitoring report. I had one takeaway from the report. A recommendation I find troubling. Quote, teachers must review all educational materials for simplistic and demeaning generalizations, lacking intellectual merit on the basis of race, color, sex, gender identity, religion, national origin, and sexual orientation. And teachers must use appropriate activities, discussions, or supplementary materials to provide balance and context for any such stereotypes depicted, end quote. My analysis, I can think of 1,000 things that could go wrong with this previous statement. Teachers do need greater freedom. However, there needs to be guardrails. One question, has an equity team been formed? Who are they? And have they produced any recommendations? Finally, without a course change from this ideological and political transformation of Lunenburg Public Schools, I believe the following will happen, which I do not support. 1, we will need to change our mascot from Blue Knights to something else. Knights were protectors of the crown and oppressed marginalized groups. We cannot have a knight guarding the entrance of the school, even if it is blue. 2, to be equitable and inclusive, we will need to make sure that the LGBTQIA+ community is welcome, celebrated, and encouraged in the school community. The mental health of the school's kiddos is paramount. So if a child wishes to change their identity, the school must support the transformation with or without the parents. Children do not need a non-supportive parent involved in life-changing decisions. This will apply to all students, K through 12. Even first graders will need safe spaces while wrestling with their identity. 3, the official position of the Mass Association of School Superintendents, or MASS, has a written statement on 8/9/2021 dealing with critical race theory. Quote, critical race theory is not taught in the school. However, by having all teachers and staff attend equity workshops or professional development and supplying them with supplementary materials, we will make sure all students get the message. White children will need to understand their privilege and thus atone for the past. Non-white students will need to understand they are victims and there needs to be justice. 4, AP courses will no longer be necessary. We cannot possibly have children who are not grade level proficient in the same room with children taking AP courses. Eventually, we will eliminate testing and standards altogether. Social workers, counselors will become the gatekeepers of higher education. They will decide, keeping in mind, of course, equity, inclusion, and diversity, who goes to college. Last, but most important to remember, as we transform LPS, Lunenburg Public Schools. Based on research, Lunenburg has a large portion of its population who are religious, patriotic, still believe in traditional values. It's Lunenburg. So we advise that all the recommendations not be implemented at once. We need to condition the community for change and not shock it. We need to bring them along slowly. Some call it mission creep. If we do this right and follow the master plan, the school's children will become tomorrow's social warriors. I would like to end with this quote taken from the Castle website, who you all refer to at times and in the reports as well, titled SEL in School Districts. Quote, articulate the value and importance of social and emotional learning in every space. Social emotional learning is the pathway towards equity, access, and social justice. This proves that SEL is an ideological political movement, which has little to do with improving the learning environment. Last, it's not too late to change course. This is your legacy as committee members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plant.
And thank you for the extra time.
Oh, that's all right. There wasn't a great mass of people. As I did last week, I will look at your comments, and I will comment during my chair's report, which I will address your comments now, because that's where we are on the agenda.
Can I make a quick public comment?
Yeah, yes, you may. Yes, you may have a quick public comment.
Thank you very much. I would like to take the opportunity, noting the calendar and that the town caucus will be coming up in approximately 4 weeks, to announce my intent to run for election to the school committee. As I think you all know, I was appointed in July of last year to fill out a vacated term, and I would like to run for that term for a full term. And my view, as I stated back in July, is really to make progress in 4 areas: safety, achievement, engagement, and budget. I think we've made nominal improvements in all of those areas, or progress, I guess, is probably a better way to put it, in all of those areas over the last 6 or so months. But I see plenty of opportunity and plenty of work to do, and therefore I will seek election to a full term. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beardmore. So, is there any public comment on the Zoom?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. So then, the chair's report. I did attend the MASC workshop regarding budgeting this year. There is no discussion around helping communities transition from the loss of ESSER funds. MASC has advocated to the governor's office to raise the inflation adjustment cap from 4.5% to 6.1% for Student Opportunity Act funds. In this, the 3rd year of SOA implementation, there is supposed to be boosts in special education, ELL, and low-income funding. The MSBA, no accelerated repair projects like windows, roofs, and boilers are being entertained at the moment. However, there was some conversation about the need to change the way they look at those formulas and how the program works that Treasurer Goldberg is looking into. So they did say that. There was a list of concerns to share with legislators, and I will talk about those in that part of the agenda. And I would like the public to be aware that there are 2 school committee seats open this spring. Mr. Beardmore obviously running for one. If you have an interest in working with the committee, there are 2 paths for getting on the ballot. One way is to be nominated at the town caucus. The caucus will be held on March 27th at 7 o'clock at the Lunenburg Middle High School auditorium. The other way would be to take out nomination papers from the town hall. The election is on May 20th. I would also suggest that if you are planning on running, you might want to speak with a member of the school committee so we can talk to you about the time commitment and the interest you may have and help you out a little bit with your decision. The state legislators are considering a bill to continue free lunch for all school children in the state. Please contact our state legislators, Senator Cronin, Representative Kushmarek, and Representative Scardale in support of this bill. I do believe they do all support it. It is House Bill 766 and Senate Bill 1013. At our last meeting, a public comment was made that required thoughtful response. And as is my practice, I'm answering those questions in my chair's report. As to the transportation policy, it was stated that all students should be bused. The school committee agrees with this in principle. However, we do not have the funds to guarantee busing for all students. To do so would take funding from academic programs, and there is no guarantee of an additional bus and driver being available. It was stated that 25 students district-wide need behavioral, emotional, social support. In looking through the information presented to the school committee, I have found 115 referrals this school year through December 23rd. The caseload for social workers and guidance counselors as of January 4th was 289. This is about 19% of the student population, so this does indicate great need. Our SEL programming is designed not only to support these students, but to support all students in their interactions with others. Both DESE and our district feel it is important for all students. Mr. Schoenbrini will speak to the data available in support of SEL at the conclusion of my remarks. The equity audit report is available to the public on the district website. The school committee will entertain questions from the public regarding this document and answer them in a future meeting. The format of this session will be announced well before the meeting when it occurs. To answer specific questions, the auditors were provided no information from the district regarding students who qualify for free lunch. There is general information available on the DESE website, which is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. On the DESE website, if the auditors wanted to access it, they could get it there. It was not necessary to query the auditors as they had no unmonitored access to the students. Administrators were present during any student involvement. The audit has cost $23,750 to date, and an additional $10,000 is remaining on the contract. I have one other comment on this topic. This audit was suggested by the school committee. It directly ties into our school committee's goals and is tied to overall achievement. Students need to feel comfortable, confident, and acknowledged in order to be ready to learn. I appreciate the comments brought before the committee. Many times families may have concerns or questions, but don't bring them forward. So I very much appreciate you bringing these forward. It was stated that many families feel the school district is failing our students. Academic achievement is at the forefront of all school committee and district goals. Dr. Burnham and her team have taken a good, hard look at achievement in this district. The common goal for educators and administrators this year is tied to academic growth. The state curriculum frameworks are rigorous and attainable. For all students to access these standards, much work has needed to be done. As indicated by the presentation at our last meeting by Mrs. Scott and her team, our students are making progress, but much more progress needs to be made. The teachers are diving into data and learning how to translate this data into more differentiated instruction. This will ensure that all students, those above, below, and at grade level, get the instruction they need. This takes time. The structure needed to achieve this is now in place. The goal is to move 80% of our students to grade level performance by June of 2024. We will be looking for significant growth toward this goal by June of 2023. This is what high-performing districts do. I spent my career teaching in a high-performance district, both in the classroom and in the curriculum office. Dr. Burnham is doing this correctly. This path will lead to higher achievement for all students. We will have the data to show this growth. If there is difficulty, we will have data to indicate why and how to remediate. Our teachers need to teach the standards. It is a state requirement. It is not a boot around their necks, rather a pathway ahead for our students. I hope I have answered most of these questions from last week. I will turn this over to Mr. Schoenbrini.
Yeah, that's what I was going for at first, but walking helps.
Sorry, Mr. Schoenbrini, we have a lighting problem, but you may go
No, that's
ahead.
fine. First, I want to start out by thanking Mr. Plant and his wife. Their commitment to their child or children and the school district are admirable. They are present at virtually every school committee meeting. They express real and important concerns. They are focused on student achievement, and they are courteous, patient, and respectful of the rules of the forum. It is out of gratitude and respect for their efforts that I wanted to provide additional information to them and parents that have concerns like theirs regarding SEL. The first thing I want to state is that I am not an expert. I'm not even a novice. I do not have the subject matter expertise to speak about or teach SEL for students. But what I can do, and what I do daily as part of my job, is to read research. At the last meeting, Mr. Plant brought up an excellent point. In my original statement on research I did on SEL, I found empirically validated peer-reviewed journal articles that supported the notion that SEL improved student achievement. That is, of course, the most important goal of the school committee, in my mind, to direct policy and oversee the district in a way that best promotes improvements in student achievement. If something doesn't improve student achievement, or worse yet, harms student achievement, we need to know. The summary of my research review was that there was considerable objective evidence that SEL improves student achievement. I have a list of articles that I'm happy to share with Mr. Plant or anybody else that wants to look at them. That is a good sample of the research that is out there. There are a couple of articles that I particularly want to highlight. One of them in the articles that I reviewed was an article that focused on tracking student achievement through the implementation of SEL regardless of school size. And this is particularly important because Mr. Plant's question before us was, have any of these studies looked at a school district like Lunenburg? And the answer is that yes, they have. In fact, some of these studies are designed to focus out the context of the school district and see if school district, regardless of school district size or money, whether SEL improves student achievement. The article that does this is the positive impact of social and emotional learning for kindergarten to 8th grade students, findings from 3 scientific reviews. It was in the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, and it was published in 2008. That article in particular was working on a number of different indicators, and they were using multiple school districts of multiple sizes with multiple funding levels to figure out if these were truly universal gains. And as it turns out, they were. Another article that I read that was important is a meta-analysis, and this one is entitled Promoting Positive Youth Development Through School-Based Social and Emotional Learning Interventions, a meta-analysis on follow-up effects. This was published in the journal Child Development in 2017. This article also found that there was notable empirically validated improvements in student performance through the use of SEL. Finally, there was a third article that I found to be especially enlightening because it talked about the empirically tested mechanisms by which SEL improves student academic achievement. This article, An Empirical Basis for Linking Social and Emotional Learning to Academic Performance, was published in Contemporary Educational Psychology in 2019. This is just a sampling of the dozens of empirically validated peer-reviewed articles that show that it improves student achievement. Mr. Plant's question at the last meeting was very precise and very important. Have any of these studies been run on school districts like Lunenburg? And the answer, of course, as these studies that I just listed show, is yes. In fact, it's important to understand how these studies work and why they have been testing results in school districts like ours. First, though, I want to make sure that everybody understands that I only looked at empirically validated studies. Case studies, histories, and personal experiences are important, and they are one way of examining how to increase student achievement. But I wanted to rely instead on studies that use data, numbers, and scientific method to evaluate improvements in student achievement. Second, I wanted to make sure that these studies were not flukes, one-time events, or, as Mr. Plant's question gets at, unrepresentative of what could happen here in Lunenburg. As such, I only read those studies that were subject to peer review. This is important. My wife is a scientist and has published many journal articles, and they have all been peer reviewed. So I have a firsthand understanding of the merits and winnowing effect of peer review. Only the best studies make it through a gauntlet of relevant subject matter experts, and that is exactly what peer review is. In reviewing these studies, I paid attention to one kind of study, a meta-analysis. Meta-analyses are studies of studies. By doing a meta-analysis, you get an even bigger and broader picture. This is where school districts like ours are included. One of the studies that I listed above had a sample size of 700,000 students, including students in all different kinds of school districts. And they did this because if you only study inner city schools or wealthy large suburban schools or very rural schools, the results, as Mr. Plant's question implies, might not apply here. But by using results from meta-analyses, which are studies of studies, we can see how data from districts like ours is incorporated into the body of knowledge about SEL. So the answer to his question is yes. These studies, particularly the meta-analysis studies listed that I just mentioned above, incorporate data from a broad range of school districts, including ours, but not limited to districts like ours. Additionally, one of the studies that I mentioned does great work to factor out context in determining whether SEL improves student achievement. But the results are the same. Regardless of the study and the meta-analysis, SEL improves student achievement. And that is why I support SEL in Lunenburg Public Schools. The minute the evidence changes, we as the school committee should examine SEL. But the evidence in one case or a few cases or one day or a few days is not enough. We need real data. We need to see trends. We need that data to be as robust, as relevant, and as free of noise, politics, and bias as possible. Right now, the data robustly supports the inclusion of SEL in the curriculum. It is also important to me to acknowledge that Mr. Plant's concerns are real. They have real objections about SEL. Those objections should be explored in good faith. The questions about SEL their questions about SEL should be answered, and they may never be while they may never be convinced, they may not like the answer. Part of living in a democracy is that we learn to agree to disagree and do so in a polite and respectful way. I hope I have engaged their question in that way, and I hope that I have responded as they have always done, politely and respectfully. But in terms of the overall issue, they have brought to the school board, the consensus of empirically validated, peer-reviewed studies is clear. SEL improves student achievement. And if the chair wants, I can include the list of articles, including the 3 that I highlighted, so that anybody who wants to can go and read them. I will be the first to admit that many of the subject matter expert information that teachers would know immediately required me to do an extraordinary amount of digging just to understand the jargon and the language that was used. But I'm happy to share the little sampling of research that I did. And I think that it is insightful, and I think that it answers Mr. Plant's point.
Yeah, we can put those in our minutes
Thank you.
as part of your statement. Thank you, Mr. Schoenbrini. Mr. Beardmore wanted to make a statement as you had addressed him as well. Mr. Beardmore.
Thank you. First of all, I'm done taking criticism about prolonging these meetings. After watching the last meeting on YouTube and now sitting through the last half an hour. Sorry, I don't mean to make light of a serious topic, but I'm actually glad we're spending as much time on this as we are. My comments are more personal in nature. And I want to address actually a couple of things that Mr. Plant raised that have not been addressed. My decision to seek appointment to the school committee last year was after years and years of participating in the public forum here. I served as a member of the zoning board. I served as a member of the finance committee. For a time, I was the chairman of the finance committee. And what many people may not realize is that I've got just as many hours sitting in those seats and commenting from commenters table as I do sitting at a dais. And so I take these comments and criticisms very seriously because I come from that position. In fact, in July, the tipping point that brought me to seek appointment was a disagreement that I had with a decision that the superintendent had made. It wasn't the only issue, and it was eventually resolved, but it was enough to get me to kind of get over the edge and throw my name in the hat. In the months that I've served on the school committee, I can tell you that the superintendent has been extraordinarily responsive to me over a myriad of issues, most of which I think we agree with, but some that we disagree with, we disagree on, and we have worked to find common ground and compromises on a number of issues. I believe we're in the second year of a 5-year contract for our superintendent. I could be wrong, but I think that's where we are. And at this point, I see no reason to change the track that we're on with the superintendent. We are in, as Mr. Plant mentioned earlier today, we are on a long arc of development and progress with respect to the curriculum that the superintendent instigated, I think, under the direction of the school committee at the time. And there was only one member of this committee at the time that the superintendent came on board on the current committee. That we needed to show more progress, and that we needed to align our curriculum with national and state standards, and we needed to do a better job there. And I think that we're beginning to see on our dashboard indicators some early indicators that progress is being made. If you had asked me in July what SEL stood for, I could not have told you. It was honestly the furthest thing from my radar. I'm not an expert on it. I don't come from education or behavioral health fields. I know very little about it, and I've done a fraction of the research that Mr. Scilambrini has done. But here's what I do know. I know Lunenburg really well. I've lived here for 40 of my 50 years, with a 10-year block in the middle that I was in the Army and chasing business. And I know this town really well. And I know the schools pretty well because I've got a kid that went 1 through 12 and another kid that's on a preschool through 12 chart. And I know the schools pretty well. And looking at the research that we have available to us, and interestingly, I have not read the tiered focus monitoring report, so I will find that and read it. But looking at other reports that I've read and the most recent equity audit, I think we have some climate issues that need to be addressed. I think we need more data. In fact, I've asked for the crosstabs for some of those charts and survey questions, because I want to zero in on exactly who are the communities that are answering in ways that we should be concerned about. I also know that SEL is well researched. It's well heeled in DESE and is part of the approved DESE curriculum. And I also know that our charge as school committee members to oversee and mandate curriculum is well heeled in case law. And we have an opinion from our attorney that states that much more eloquently than I ever could. But we as parents have a variety of choices. We do have rights. We have a lot of rights. I have the right to send my children to parochial school. I have the right to homeschool them. And I have the right to send them to public schools. But when I send them to public schools, I am sending them at taxpayer expense within a framework that is overseen by a governmental committee. In this case, it's the school committee. And I think that our authority is in a good place here, and I think that we are doing the right thing. Now, I spent a lot of time over the last week and a half when I returned from my vacation, and I watched the 4-hour meeting. Following up on Mr. Plant's comments, I had an hour meeting with the superintendent earlier this week. I called around to a lot of friends that I have around Lunenburg who I know are more aligned with Mr. Plant's thinking than my own on this topic. And I really dug into and explored issues around my understanding of SEL and the common objections that come out of this. And I think we certainly don't have time to explain it in detail, but where I'm really struggling is that I think that to address some of the climate issues that we want to address, we have to help children to manage their emotions, to always foster respect and inclusion, particularly in a public classroom setting. But not to tell them how to think about the behaviors or the religious beliefs or the preferences that may drive some of those emotions. And that's a really hard line to define, particularly for an unfully developed mind, the kid. It's hard to understand where that line is. And I think that for parents that are concerned about this, it's really hard to put that trust in the teacher that's doing the work to do that. That, again, that's my interpretation. After spending a lot of time talking and thinking about this. I said many weeks ago, I keep an open mind. I will keep an open mind on this. My mind has not changed. But I think that the issues that are brought forth are really important to continue to pay attention to. And to deal with in as respectful and as open and as honest a way as we possibly can. And thank you for your letting me take the time.
Okay, thank you very much. We are going to move on our agenda to review and approve minutes. And we have minutes from 1/5/22, of which Mr. Schoenbrini was a member of the committee, and Mr. Leighton and myself. I appreciate very much. I'm sure it must have been Mrs. Peterson who figured out that those had never been approved. And did Mr. Schoenbrini or Mr. Leighton, does anybody have any questions about those minutes? So you were probably there.
Probably was, but I have no memory.
So I would take those separately.
I'll make a motion to approve the January 5th, 2022 minutes.
I'll second that.
All right. And we need a roll call vote because Tony is awake. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Schoenbrini,
Yes.
Mr. Beardmore,
Abstain.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Archambault.
Yes. Okay. And then I think we have to put off the 118 once again, because I was not present and Mr. Schoenbrini was not present and Mrs. Kelly isn't here tonight. So that will need to be put off. And then February 1st, is there any discussion about the February 1st minutes?
I will also abstain from that because I did not participate, although I did watch the 4-hour meeting.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the February 1st, 2023 minutes.
I'll second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Schoenbrini,
Yes.
Mr. Beardmore,
Abstain.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Ashambo.
Yes. Now to review and approve line item transfers. We have none this evening, I believe. Okay, well, that's fast. And the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. An update for you on the Family School Partnership Initiative Program. The district team attended a cross-district meeting last Thursday. That meeting involved all of the districts that are part and parcel of the program for this year. We will be meeting independently as a district team on February 27th, the Monday we return from the vacation week. We feel that we're making very good progress, and our facilitators and coaches also believe that we're making very good progress in identifying some priority areas to work on as a district. Regarding changes to the discipline law, earlier this week, DESE released their guidance through the commissioner's weekly email. MASS, the Mass Association of School Superintendents, also shared some thoughts on that guidance. I will be meeting with building administrators to further review the guidance. Our initial thinking is that perhaps some handbook language will have to change, specifically as it relates to reference to mandatory suspensions. I wanted to make everybody aware that we will be doing some network upgrades in each of the schools during the school vacation week. On the 21st, the Turkey Hill upgrades will occur. On the 22nd, the primary school. On the 23rd, the middle high school, and on the 24th, TC Passios. Those dates for each of those buildings, the internet will be impacted and unavailable to access potentially for the duration of the entire day. Most folks who work a 12-month are also taking some vacation days during that week. There are a small number of folks who have opted to work from home where they can access internet and continue to do some work. But that, again, is a very small number. I wanted to make folks aware that the LHS course selection is almost upon us. When we return from vacation, that scheduling process, the selection of courses for students will begin. The approved program of studies for the 23-24 year, the program that you all reviewed and approved, is posted and has been made available for each grade level through their Google Classrooms so that students can review their options as well. So between February 27th and March 10th, teachers will make recommendations on PowerSchool. March 7th, the grade 11 will be meeting with guidance during their advisory block. March 7th, grade 9 and 10 will be meeting with their guidance counselors during advisory. March 14th begins open registration. And March 17th is when that registration process will close at end of day. Again, a reminder that we are currently accepting registrations for our pre-kindergarten and kindergarten programs. The links for the registration forms are posted on the district page as well as on the primary school webpage. And again, a reminder, our early learning center and extended day registrations will open on April 3rd. So we still have a little bit of time before those open. As a reminder, next week, schools are closed for the vacation week. Offices will also be closed on Monday in observance of President's Day. And our next school committee meeting is March 1st at 6:30 p.m. That's a hybrid meeting from Town Hall. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Ask a quick question.
Yes.
On the discipline law topic, there was some discussion when that first surfaced that was going to drive some additional cost associated with, you know, sort of the paperwork and the process of it. And I recall vaguely that did come up in your budget presentation as well. Do you have any more color on that in terms of what that's actually going to drive in terms of burden on administrators?
We're gonna have to take a close look at that, but I think in some preliminary conversations relative to the guidance that was just released on Monday afternoon, I think we're already doing some things in practice around discipline that are consistent with the intent with the change in the law. We'll dig a little bit more closely in on some of that guidance that's come from DESE and have more conversation around that. I feel at this moment a little bit more comfortable with the idea that we wouldn't need a full-time position. We can take a closer look at you know, still whether or not there's some stipended need potential, you know, for teachers to step up and provide some additional restorative justice type discipline. But stay tuned on that. But right now I'm feeling a lot more comfortable than when we first had to introduce a budget at the January 4th meeting.
Okay,
So
thank you.
we'll keep you updated on that.
Okay, next is our student representative. I'm not seeing our student representative. Are you? All right, then. He's probably at the competitive class plays because we are sitting here like a football field away from the competitive class plays, and we're hoping all of that goes wonderfully. Under old business, we have an action item, the 2023-2024 school calendar. I know we had some concerns about the Yom Kippur date, and I looked at the dates that the rabbi gave us against the dates of Nature's Classroom, and they seem okay. They're tight, but they seem okay.
Mrs. Champagne indicated that they were going to look into the possibility of avoiding the Monday of that week in September.
Okay.
If that's an option that they can pursue, they will do so.
Are there any other questions about the school calendar for next year?
Need a motion.
Yes, I would think that's where we are.
I move to approve the 23-24 school calendar as proposed.
I'll second that.
And a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Schoenbrini,
Yes.
Mr. Beardmore,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Ashen.
Yes. So now we go to our first read of the transportation policy. There has been a slight change since the last time. Mrs. Kelly isn't here, so I can read it, or Mr. Schoenbrini, if you would like to, you're welcome to.
I can read.
I am trying to find it on, I have like 15 windows open because I was following up. I'm trying to find it. If somebody could post it, I'm happy to read it from the Zoom.
I don't know how to do that, so.
Hold on, let me keep looking.
I've got it. I can read it if you want. The hard part is reading the cross throughs, but I guess we just skip over that as you read it, and you read it as proposed.
Yes, we read it as proposed. I think Mr. Beardmore is going to read it.
This is the fiscal management and non-instructional operations one. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Peter, I can see it if you want me to read it, whatever you want to do. You got dulcet tones, so I won't step on your toes.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
All
You know it
all
better.
right, all right. Fiscal management and non-instructional, sorry, somebody just moved it down. Non-instructional operations, transportation, transportation duties and responsibilities of the school committee. This is policy 3601. The purpose of the school transportation is to get pupils from home to school and back in a safe, efficient, and economical manner. Other purposes include the provision of transportation for academic field trips in direct support of the curriculum, transportation for the support of co-curricular programs, athletics, music, drama, and the like. The Lunenburg Public Schools will transport all K through 6th grade students. Grades 7 through 12 students will need to register by the district deadline, May 1st, to receive transportation. The district will make the transportation form available by April 1st via email and on the district and school websites. The Lunenburg Public Schools does not provide transportation for preschool students unless this service is required by the student's individualized education plan, known as an IEP. Paragraph 1, bus application. Student families wishing for their students to be bused shall submit a bus application. Subparagraph A, all students in grades K through 6 shall be bused if and only if a bus application is submitted on their behalf by the district deadline date of May 1st. Pursuant to state law and regulation, all students K through 6 living more than 2 miles from school are entitled to busing. Failure to submit a bus application before May 1st shall be deemed a waiver of access to busing. Subparagraph B, all other students grades 7 through 12 shall be bused based on their application being submitted by the deadline, May 1st. Once the bus application deadline has passed, no additional bus applications shall be reviewed or granted. Subparagraph D, should the number of applications exceed the number of available seats, the district will determine bus assignment based on the date and time of application. Paragraph 2, bus application due date. Bus applications are due by 5 p.m. on May 1st. Applications sent after this date shall not be reviewed or granted. Subparagraph A, in the event that multiple applications are submitted on behalf of a student, only the first application shall be counted. Paragraph 3, emergency bus applications. In the event of a newly arising condition that necessitates busing of a student after the application deadline, the district shall consider such applications in their sole discretion. Paragraph 4, outreach. The school district, based on known need, shall conduct individual outreach to families that may be unable to complete the bus application form. Paragraph 5, finality of decisions. All bus application decisions by the school district are final. Paragraph 6, conflict and severability. Nothing in this policy shall be interpreted as conflicting with state or federal law or regulations. In the event that some provision of this policy is deemed unlawful, all other provisions shall be given their full force and effect. I noticed one variance. We spelled busing 2 different ways. And I looked and I don't think that there is a correct way. Or there is. So that's the only thing. We spelled busing with 2 S's in paragraph 1A, and then we spelled it with 1 S. Sorry, in paragraph 3.
Well, we can make sure that they're both spelled the same way. Either is acceptable. Thank you. We did have a parent comment on this, an email this week. And the comment was that they felt that busing should be based solely on mileage from school. And the suggestion was to look at the busing policy in the city of Salem, and that they felt we should look at that. I did look at the busing policy for the city of Salem, and it was clearly by, if you live, I can't remember the numbers, but it might be a mile away, you weren't bused. You know, it followed mileage. We have difficulty with that, in that the DESI regulation for busing does concern if the route the child takes to school is dangerous, then they should be bused, as there are no sidewalks on 2A east of the property or on the south side of 2A. And as there are no sidewalks locally here, we have tried to get them put in towards Northfield in that way, but we're still waiting for the select board decision on the ARPA funds. It would be dangerous. I also looked, the city of Salem has sidewalks around their schools and they also have crossing guards. So that would not be applicable here. I understand the problem, but we can't have 200 people decide they want to take the bus the week before school starts, which is what happened last year. So that's stressful for everyone, the families, for the students, for the bus company, for everyone. So that is why we have developed this policy.
Can I ask a
Mr.
question?
Beardmore, certainly.
So, by the way, I echo everything that you just said, I think. And as you said during your report earlier, we want to bus everybody.
Yeah.
And that's really the intent here, but to do that, we've got to put together a process and a bit of infrastructure, bureaucracy, call it what you will, to be able to facilitate that with a limited amount of funds.
Mhm.
And there just is no way to deal at this point from a budgetary or logistical standpoint, adding more buses. So we have to work with what we have. My question is, on the line that I believe Mr. Schoolman Brady suggested during the last meeting, paragraph 1A, failure to submit a bus application before May 1st shall be deemed a waiver of access to busing. It's really a legal question, which is, can our policy basically limit a right? I'm not sure if right is the right word, but a privilege that a certain class of people have. And I don't know the answer to that, but I'm curious if any effort has been made to that sentence.
Yes, go ahead.
Carol, this question actually came up at the policy subcommittee meeting. And I believe that almost exactly the way that Peter phrased it. And I think that it was put to the school district's lawyer. So yes, somebody has considered this, and I believe it has been vetted. If that's not correct, Dr. Burnham, let me know.
I know Liz Peterson is on the meeting this evening. I'd ask her to jump in here. I'm not sure that we got a definitive response from legal counsel last I checked with Ms. Peterson.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Burnham. I did send this question after the policy subcommittee to legal counsel. Unfortunately, she was tied up with many things that were going on with negotiations and has not had a chance to get back to me on this.
I would offer this thought. If you look at the last paragraph, 6, it does say that in the event that some provision of this policy is deemed unlawful, all other provisions shall be given their full force and effect.
Yes, it does. The problem that I see is that if that sentence is not lawful and we have appeals after the date saying, I have the right to this, and your policy is not lawful, and we do not have a stated appeals process or order of merit or something along those lines to go about adjudicating who gets a bus seat and who doesn't, we are back in the same spot that we were previously. Because by just omitting that sentence, we're opening up a new can of worms, but I'm not sure if that sentence is legal. So I don't know where that leaves us for this meeting. I think we probably need to get some indication from council, but we may, depending upon the outcome of that discussion, we may need to revisit this and come up with some sort of adjudication process.
My suggestion, it is my understanding that we can consider this a first read, take a second read in 2 weeks, because we don't want to lose time on this.
Completely agree, because the other issue is
Because we're
April
running out
1st.
of time.
We need to get the forms.
So however, should the attorney decide that that is not lawful and that we need to take it out, then I would suggest that the policy committee do so before the next meeting, and we will consider the next meeting the first read and start again. And if we find that looking at the calendar, there is not sufficient, time in between to get to that April 1st date, which very well may be the case, then we slide a meeting in just to read this.
Okay, I'm fine with
Does
that.
that work?
Yep. The other comment that I wanted to make, and it's kind of back to the original, we want to bus everybody. There was a comment that I saw, I don't know if everybody saw it, I assume you did, that, the tone of this particular policy and the tone of the school lunch policy struck people the wrong way. And I'm sensitive to that because I don't want our policies to do that. On the other hand, considering the season, this is not a Valentine's Day card. It's a policy. And I'm not quite sure how to address that. We have to be able to provide a clear path to decision-making on these issues. And I think in this case, we're pretty close to there.
I had that exact conversation today with Mrs. Peterson, that in looking at the feedback from the equity audit, that clearly there's some handbook warming up that needs to be done, kind of thing. And I agree with that. But in my thought process and in the conversation, it is a policy that's different than
Other communications.
a handbook or an email. I think in the email, it would be the language around this policy would be warmer, but I think we need to get the point across, particularly where this has been so very difficult, and how many people, I'm afraid, are going to say it's okay, don't worry about it. They'll let me in at the last minute. And we're not intending to let people in at the last minute. Unless there's been a change, unless there's been a disaster, the person driving the children to school has gotten ill, or, something horrible has happened, which we hope doesn't happen. So I understand your point. Mr. Layton, any comments on this?
No.
So, in order to make this a first read, we have to approve a first read. Usually we just approve waiving a first read.
It's been read.
Yeah, it's been.
You've done the work.
Yeah.
We're not waiving it,
You've done the work.
Just
so I
reading.
think we're
Yeah.
okay.
But there's also the concession.
Yes, but
Good,
we have
next
the
one.
concession stand policy as well. Mr. Schoenbrini, you up for that one?
Yes,
Okay,
we can put that one up. I'm happy to read through that one as well. I feel a lot of pressure. This is like when I'm reading a book my children know the words to.
well, the pressure's there. You're on, you're up for it.
Does anybody, does the person that has access to the, what's it called?
There you go.
Thank you, Dr. Burnham, or whoever it was. Fiscal management and non-instructional operations. Food service, Lunenburg Food Service Concession Stand Policy. This is policy 3701, 3701.03. Lunenburg Public School concession stand will be a retail operation as specified in 105 CMR 590.0001, purpose and definition, subsection C, food establishment, subparagraph 3A, an establishment that offers only prepackaged foods. The business office will pull a permit for the concession stand. Food preparation is not allowed. All groups can sell prepackaged food. Groups that wish to sell temperature-controlled foods must have one member of their organization, SafeServe Manager certified, and that member must be present during the operation of the concession stand. The concession stand coordinator will manage keys to the concession stand. Organizations will provide copies of SafeServe certificates when signing out a key. The organization will receive a copy of the concession stand policy and concession stand standard operating procedure at the time of the request for use of the stand, and the organization must return a signed acknowledgement of policy and procedures. Requests for concession stand usage must be submitted through the district's facility permitting system. Schedule requests will not be approved without signed acknowledgement on file. Limited lockable storage will be available for seasonal, non-perishable items. Closet storage locks will be keyed differently, but will have a master key that the concession stand coordinator will maintain. At the end of each season, all food and drink items must be removed. The fall sports season removal deadline is 5 p.m. on the Monday following Thanksgiving of each year. The spring sports season removal is 5 p.m. on the second Friday of June of each year. Any food or drink items found in the concession stand beyond these dates or at the end of a single event permit will be disposed of by the school district. A $500 fee will be assessed to any user, which results in the cleanup and or disposal of items, food left behind. All facility fees collected from operation of the concession stand will be used to maintain or improve operation of the concession stand. Booster clubs, extracurricular clubs, paragraph 1, booster clubs, extracurricular clubs, outside organizations or classes are permitted to use are required to schedule concession stand events through the district's online permit system. The athletic director and superintendent of schools will approve event requests. Paragraph 2, all food sold must be in compliance with the menu guidance detailed in the standard operating procedure menu options. There is no cooking at the concession stand or on school grounds. Homemade food is not allowed. Paragraph 3, organizations are required to determine the number of volunteers to operate the concession stand, but at least one volunteer must hold a SafeServe food manager certificate when time temperature controlled foods are sold and or be over the age of 18. All volunteers working at the concession stand must be above the age of 14. Subparagraph A, organizations will manage all operations of the concession stand during an event, including instructing and assigning all volunteers in the specified duties and shifts required. Subparagraph B, organizations will maintain a log of volunteers who work the stand for each event. Subparagraph C, volunteers must stay to clean up, empty trash cans, put equipment away, turn off all lights, and secure the facility. Paragraph 4, organizations are responsible for monitoring behavior of volunteers and are the arbitrators of disputes involving volunteers and or customers. Organizations are responsible for ensuring that the volunteers follow the rules set forth for use of the school facilities and the policy and concession standard operating procedure. Organizations will be monitored by the concession stand coordinator. Organizations that pose repeated behavioral problems, who violate the Board of Health regulations, are found cooking on site without a certified manager, are found selling items that are not allowed, and/or who fail to show up for the agreed upon scheduled event, may be banned from participating in the concession stand for the remainder of the season. 48 hours notice is required for cancellations. I don't think we're supposed to read that part. Paragraph 6, organizations will keep equipment clean and report any problems or mechanical issues to the business manager or concession stand coordinator within 24 hours.
Thank you. So do we have any questions on this policy?
SOPs with an apostrophe S. I don't think it should be an apostrophe. I think it should just be S.
Good catch. All right, then we will consider this a first read of this policy, and we will read it again at our next meeting. Thank you. Next, equity audit report.
Do we want to do the second read?
Oh,
Get a-
sorry,
Have a motion.
I
to waive
jumped over.
those.
Yep, sorry. Second read policies.
Gonna move the waivers.
Yes,
I'll second that.
and then we need a roll call vote to waive the second read of those policies.
Mr. Schoenbrini,
Yes.
Mr. Beardmore,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Ashenbo.
Yes, and I will just notate that the second read was policy number 3701.01, insufficient funds, and 3701.02, meal charging. Thank you for catching that. And then we're on to our equity audit report discussion.
So at the last meeting, I provided all the members with a print copy. You also now have a digital copy. And the purpose of putting it on the agenda this evening was just so that the committee could have some conversation around the report.
So is there anyone that has something they would like to say or ask or regarding the equity audit? It's a lot of pages and a lot of information.
Yeah, I reached out to the superintendent last week on this and need to when I have some time, formulate some more detailed questions, in particular about the survey questions and how they were reported in the pie charts. The questions that, you know, indicate that there's a meaningful number of, and some of these don't have specific numerical values associated with them, which is difficult to interpret when you've got two small pieces that don't have a number on them. But I think that in the circumstances where we have indications that kids do not feel safe, do not feel that they have that they're included, do not feel that they have a trustworthy adult. I think we have an obligation to scratch a little deeper on that and to see if there are any other indicators in terms of, you know, are there cohorts in particular that feel that way, and therefore maybe we can take action to zero in on those cohorts. You know, it's very difficult when you have a population that's 94% white, you know, to zero in on a racial type of issue. I don't know if there are other indicators or what that might have been going, you know, in terms of figuring out the the demographics of the survey, but I'm curious to know more, in particular on those survey questions.
Okay. Mr. Leighton?
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Beardmore. I think looking at the data more specifically in those subgroups definitely would be helpful. One of my big things is I think it's so important to not just take the report, put it on the side and forget about it. So I think it's revisiting it in a year, to see how the progress has been made. But I see a lot of different avenues of, say, policy, reviewing obviously a lot of policies. But one of the data points that stood out to me wasn't that one necessarily, but was actually the professional development and the other aspect of that was the latest instructional strategies for staff. So I think hopefully administration can take a view of the professional development, instructional strategies, because I was surprised at how much staff didn't think that they had the adequate support for the instructional strategies, and also that they didn't feel like they had choice as much in their professional development. So I think that would also help out the staff better, I think, too.
Mr. Schoenbrini, did you have specific things you wanted to talk about regarding this?
Yes, so one thing that I didn't know, because I didn't know what it was, what conversation you and Dr. Burnham had with the people that were writing the audit. Carol, did we get what we ordered? Like if we're at a menu, if we're at a restaurant and we order off the menu, did you get what you ordered?
In my way of thinking, I absolutely think we did. What they said they were going to do, they did. Dr. Burnham, would you agree?
I would agree. And the only other comparable consultant that we interviewed in terms of the scope of the work that they would do for this audit basically would have provided the same.
And cost twice as much.
Yes.
There was that.
So I guess with that question answered, I have sort of three generalized comments. First of all, I think I've probably read something like 40 or 50 of these different reports in different settings in my day job. And they do strike me as having a lot of templating in them. And this one did. And I appreciate the formatting, but I think that, like I was looking for more concrete ways to improve, diversity and inclusion in Lunenburg. So that's the first thing. I wish it was more tailored to Lunenburg and more specific. The second thing that I would say is and this is why I asked you the question about whether you got what you ordered. I was anticipating that we would see a lot of data around whether or not there's an achievement gap between diversity students and non-diversity students. And if there is an achievement gap, concrete steps we could take to improve that. But that's not what we ordered. So the fact that it's not there means that it's not a problem. It just means that we have to keep going a little bit. And then the third thing that I would say is I felt like the most valuable part of the report was the candid responses to a wide range of questions. And I think that those candid responses revealed two things. And this has already been touched on, Mr. Leighton touched on it, but it really does seem like the teachers want more guidance in how to teach these subjects. And it also seems like there is some consistent theme that the LGBTQ students don't feel as welcomed as they should. And so, as a first step, this was really illuminating and eye-opening. But I think that the second step we need to take needs to look at those three things. Like the second thing is we need to find a way to help support the teachers more. And then the third thing, and I think this is probably the most immediate critical need, is we've got to figure out a way to make students of all kinds, whatever, feel like they are welcome, supported, protected, and valued.
Thank you. My takeaways from this, I had some specific questions. So I think probably it would make sense if we have specific questions, like just to make one. There was a comment in bullying and discipline about bullying, particularly at the middle high school. I was wondering if she used a legal bullying definition, or if she went with the kids said they were bullied. Those are two very different things. So I had like a bunch of questions like that. So I wonder if we could, maybe by next week, email Dr. Burnham with specific questions that we could ask the consultant and see if she can provide those answers for us. That would be my first thought on what to do. I think that in general, my comments would be, I was not surprised by the culture comments at all. I was surprised with the PD comments, because I know you have a PD committee made of teachers. So, but having served on PD committees made of teachers, and then listen to teachers complain about the PD, I understand that that happens, but not in this district. But, you know, I do get that. In general, I also found the comments about welcoming environments varying so greatly, K-5 and 6-12. I didn't expect there to be like a great divide. I thought it would like creep up slowly, but it really appeared to be a great divide. And that's definitely something that has to be worked on. So that would be my first thought, is to get some of these clarifying questions answered. My second thought is, I would like to give some time to have a question and answer period for the public about this report after we've digested. I'd like us to digest it. And then I'd like to have parents be able to submit questions to us. And then we can get those answers from the consultant if we don't have them, because we may not have those answers. So we want to make sure we get anybody's answers to any of these questions answered, and have a session where we can answer those questions. And then if people had additional questions, we could take that at that time. So my thought would be, at our March 1st meeting, we have a Q&A for budget at our March 1st meeting, so I wouldn't do it there. And then we could have a general discussion with answers from Cindy for our questions at the March 1st meeting. And then at the March 15th meeting, I know we have the public hearing for the budget, but maybe we could do the Q&A on this for all stakeholders at that time. Does anybody have a better suggestion?
Again, coming into this after the decision was made to contract the survey.
Yes.
There was never any expectation that there would be a readout on this.
What do you mean?
Like typically when you do a research, like when you commission research, in my professional experience, you get a written report, you get some data sets, and somebody comes and presents the results and facilitates a Q&A, whoever did the research. But that's not what we got here. We got a written report.
No, that was not part of it. I think she will answer our questions, but it's not
Without a presentation.
without a
Okay, I mean,
presentation.
it is what it is. I would have asked for it before, but I wasn't privy to it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Okay,
You
that's
think
fine.
that seems like a reasonable course?
Yes.
Mr. Schoenbrini, does that seem like a reasonable course to you?
You're muted.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Hey,
I said, yes, I think that meeting, that will make that meeting extra long. But because they're two heavy hitting issues, hopefully we'll get a lot of public participation.
Well, I hope so. I hope we do. And I hope we do it at our budget hearing, but we don't generally. But I hope we do. We always want to hear from people.
Just as an aside, this equity audit report has been referenced in communication to parents twice, including an invitation to submit questions, comments, concerns
good.
to LPS online.
Good.
And to date, we've received one. But we'll continue to promote the fact that people can continue to take an opportunity to provide some feedback or questions, concerns.
Okay, so I think we have a plan moving forward with this. And then we can talk about what parts of this we want to engage in, first, or if there are parts that we don't feel we should engage in or whatever, we need to talk about that. But I think the first step is getting our questions answered. And then we'll move from there.
I do think that I'm very curious to hear the response to your question around the bullying
Mhm.
topic. But, this report does not come in a vacuum. There was a long thread on social media last week or the week before about bullying. I think like you, when I read these kind of things, I'm like, well, is this bullying, or is this mean kids, or is this really sensitive kids, or you don't know from reading stuff on social media, but there is a sort of an underlying narrative now that there's a bullying problem. And I think that is something that we should be thinking about taking proactive
Yes.
steps while we're doing this,
Mhm.
just to kind of get to the bottom of some of these things. And and I know that there are some, the Tiger program, there's other things in motion to do that, but I think we need to talk about that too.
I think we need to, we'll talk here about the equity audit, but then I think one of the major first steps would be to jump in on that issue.
Yeah, and I think it connects back to goal setting, whether it's the superintendent's goals and also the school committee's goals as well.
Yeah, perhaps that's a major role coming up.
Yep.
Okay, anything else? All right. Okay, it's the THES capital plan.
My favorite topic.
Or is it the get well plan? Is that how you frame it? Okay, so this evening we have Mr. Pusateri, our facilities director, on, and Mr. Cassidy is here as well. We wanted to put this on as a topic for discussion because we know that the wish of the committee is to take a look at those projects that we have listed in the capital plan for the last several years. Take a look at that with that lens of which projects would we do? What would that timeline look like if the intent was to keep the school operational for a 10 to 15 year window of time until such time as the town were ready to take on a school building project. We've had conversations around this, and this does really present some challenges. So we thought that we would have a conversation with you this evening about some of the challenges that we have encountered as we've tried to look at this again, as well as some thoughts on how we might approach it and see if the committee's on board with that kind of an approach. So I think as we take a look at all of those projects that have been historically carried in that capital plan, the 10-year capital plan for the school department, there are several systems replacement projects on the capital plan. The challenge becomes, and I'll turn this over to Mr. Pusateri in a few minutes. When you start looking at doing some of those larger scale systems replacement or upgrade, one thing leads to the next. And now you're into multiple projects at the same time. Once you're opening walls, asbestos abatement. I think Mr. Leighton is aware that through conversations with the building design committee, that too much work now triggers different requirements. And then we're into, we now need to have the sprinkler system installed. We now need to have all of the bathrooms ADA compliant. And the scope of the project, it's like you pulled one thread, you intended just to pull one thread. And now it becomes a much bigger challenge. In thinking about that, there's a significant amount of funding then that would have to be committed once we start to open that up. But the additional thing is that we aren't going to be able to do these projects in the summertime when the schools are empty, which means that we would be displacing the entire student body, staff, office, everything out of that facility for an extended period of time. We're talking portable classrooms potentially. Where are we putting those? And then if we're putting them on field space, now we're displacing our LISA program, our Bengals program. We already know that we have challenges meeting everybody's needs for field space. It becomes this large ripple impact, which is a significant price tag attached. So I'll let Mr. Pusateri dig in a little bit more deeply from a facilities vantage point, but that's kind of like the big picture challenge that we're having. We do think that there are a couple of projects that we could reasonably take on, and with the intended purpose of trying to prolong the life of the school for that 10 to 15 year window. So we can kind of get to that, but I'll turn it over now to Mr. Pusateri.
Thank you, Dr. Burnham. So the discussions that internally that we've had regarding the Turkey Hill and all the work required to continue to keep that building operating, discussions weigh in on what projects can be done during the 2-month window in the summers versus other projects that absolutely cannot be done during that time frame. First on the list is the roof of the facility, which is nearing end of life. However, the roof has been maintained. We've had very few issues with leaks in some of the second floor classrooms. But one of the major concerns or costs associated with replacing that roof is the agreement with the company that owns the solar panels. We have 15 years or up until the date that contract was executed, where if the school district or the town decides to replace that roof, the owners of the solar panel system will remove it, store it, and reinstall it at absolutely no cost to the town or the school district. That window of opportunity either closes September 1 of 2025 or June 30th of 2026, depending how the contract is read. So either way, where this project would have to be done during the summer, it's a project that would need to get completed during the summer of 2025. John Londa had put some numbers together. regarding that project at approximately $500,000, which would be the town or the school's half. But until we get a roofing engineering company in there to come up with a complete design of the re-roofing and reinstallation and get that priced, and whether or not we are going to go with BSA on contributing half of those funds, we don't know what that cost is going to be. But if we wait until after we get that freebie from the owners of the solar panels, that cost is going to increase dramatically. Have not engaged them in conversation regarding those costs, but it's going to be a significant number. The other project that we've spoken about that we could do during the summer would be to replace majority of the windows and all the exterior doors. And I know the exterior door project is one of the capital articles that we have. We're not sure yet and won't know until probably May whether that's going to be approved. So those could be 2 consecutive summer projects that we could do, probably not consecutively during the same summer, having them both going on, but they could be done during the summer. And as Dr. Burnham has also referenced, is any major upgrades that need to be done to the school. Once we reach, and I'm not 100% sure on the percentages, but once we reach, and I believe it's about 30% of the facilities evaluation, that triggers all ADA compliances and NFP upgrades that will need to get done. So understanding that we're looking at a complete mechanical and electrical upgrade, we will also need to be forced to install a new sprinkler system with fire detection systems. And once we're into that project, before that can begin, there is a tremendous amount of asbestos abatement that needs to be done. And once we've triggered these,
We're going to interrupt you just for a second, Mr. Pusateri.
Mr. You're unfortunately without visual aids. I'm having a hard time following you here. What specifically are the triggers for things like ADA compliant doors and whatnot, and sprinklers?
it's a percentage. If the projects that we're doing are above, and I believe it's the 30% percentage of the value of the building, then that triggers all the necessary upgrades where we need to bring the building up to compliance.
Is that a replacement value?
Whatever the assessed value of the building is, that's what the requirement centers around.
And that's both fire and safety and ADA?
We need to bring the building up. So yes, it would be ADA compliance with egress, with fire suppression systems, with bathrooms, all interior doors, bubblers, anything requiring an ADA update. But
is there a time horizon associated with that, with those upgrades?
Not a time horizon, Peter, but it's just based on once this project starts. Not typically, but in years past, if a building was undergoing several renovation projects year to year, and the individual renovation project did not trigger that percentage, you would be okay. But when you go through a facility, the state looks at all of the projects that you are entertaining, and that number is definitely going to exceed that percentage, where we will be required by the state to bring that building up to code.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna need to have a follow-up conversation on this to fully understand it. But I appreciate you surfacing the issue.
So, thank you, I appreciate that. So the biggest concern that we have is knowing that one phase of this project is going to have asbestos abatement, ADA compliancy with plumbing, bathrooms, electrical and mechanical upgrades, which is a complete replacement of the system from the boiler rooms through all the classrooms. We're dealing with, an infrastructure that is, almost 60 years old. This project to encompass all of that is going to be pretty much a 2-year shutdown of that facility. And this does not include, and we've discussed this, bringing the classrooms up to the standard in which they are worthy of educating students, technology wise, electrical wise, and so forth. Doesn't include new furniture. But the basic of the discussion is, again, we can do the roof and the doors and windows probably in 2 summers, but the remaining work on the upgrade to that project is going to be extensive. And again, will probably require a 2-year shutdown of that facility. And it's not a situation where you can electrically and mechanically upgrade one wing at a time, which then, getting back to Dr. Burnham's concerns are, we then have to figure out where to place the students, the staff, the offices in temporary classrooms in an environment where it's safe and we have access for buses and cars, and where that is going to be. I've started discussions with a local company in Littleton regarding leasing temporary facilities, which are modular, which can be brought on site. But we won't have those numbers for a while because it's going to take a long time to figure out where exactly the town is going to allow us or where we can put these classrooms. So again, going back to the biggest concern that we have is these major upgrades are going to require probably a 2-year shutdown of that facility to completely renovate it. And the only way to do that is to bring in your engineers and your architects and come up with a complete set of drawings of after windows and windows, doors, and roof, and put that out to bid and come up with the total cost for the complete renovation of that facility. So it's not an issue where you bring in a mechanical contractor and say, hey, we want to upgrade mechanical, and bring in an electrician to upgrade the electrical portion, and then bring in a fire suppression system. I mean, all these need to be drawn out, designed, engineered, stamped, and go out to bid. And the cost of that, I'm not sure how accurate John Launder's numbers are, but we've got numbers from the BSA on renovations versus new construction, and we've presented those, but as of now, we are very unsure of what that total number is going to be. And not a concern, but the discussions that Mr. Cassidy and Dr. Burnham and I have had is, if this is something that the town definitely wants to explore and proceed with, the best solution is to, or I look at it as, get the roof and the windows and the doors done. The outside facade of the building, the brickwork is intact, it's not deteriorating, and you seal that building up with a new roof and new windows, and then you can work from the inside out. But again, as stated, it's the roof and the windows and doors get done first, 2 summers, and then how long it's going to take to get engineers and architects involved in this project to come up with a set of drawings and then put that out to bid is, it's an extensive project. And then once we do that, when we get the final number of the cost of that, then what happens? Is the town going to decide that's too much money on an old building? Or, do they decide to, let's entertain, a new facility? But it's going to take a lot of money to get that building up to standard, and to get it to continue to operate efficiently for the next 10 or 12 years.
Which is why we scaled our thinking back around what to do just to maintain the building as nuts and bolts operational for another 10 years. One of the other projects that we've discussed, rather than a full replacement of the heating system in the building, we did start to explore the possibility of installing split units into classrooms that would be capable of air conditioning, which has been a challenge that teachers have been talking about for a number of years. It becomes a difficult environment for learning when we get a series of days above 90. But if those units were capable of cooling and heating, if we had a system failure, we could at least keep the classroom spaces heated to a comfortable level. The scale of that project would be much less. We know that we have enough electrical capacity to the building to support installation of those units on the second floor of Turkey Hill. What we're not sure of is whether or not we have enough to do the entire building of classroom spaces. Mr. Pusateri, you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, so the electrical contractor that has been doing a lot of work for many years in the facility had him come through, walk through the split system installation for the second floor of the school. Took him a while to figure out that, yes, we do have the capacity to do that, and gave us pricing to do that. Did not have a discussion with that contractor regarding additional electricity for the same project for the first floor.
And that's because when we first started talking about this project months ago, the thought was if we could, over time, install some units on the second floor of Turkey Hill for the air conditioning benefit to those classroom spaces. But again, in the context of this conversation and with the challenges that we had during the cold snap with maintaining the heat at a comfortable level in the classrooms, that's when we started, thinking about, is this a possible safety net, if you will? So that's why we don't know for sure if we have the electrical capacity to do the first floor as well. Mr. Cassidy, was there anything you wanted to add?
If I may, through you to the committee, Mike Cassidy, business manager. This is obviously very complicated. We just to take a step back, when we started talking about this internally, we knew we had to really disassemble the capital plan that has been for Turkey Hill that's been presented over the last few years. So just looking at that, we're trying to reimagine what the priorities are, hoping to get funding to secure some of the systems, the windows, and hopefully align with when funding is available potentially for a new building. So we're not really even sure when that is, but if we're going out to some sort of date in the future for a new construction, we've got to do some improvements to get to that point. And I think we're looking at some systems that that will secure the building, offer some sort of comfort to the occupants, the students and the teachers, and hopefully align with some future spending for the town. The funding source for the projects that we're talking about is yet to be determined. But so once again, that's something that's in consideration too. So, to Dr. Burnham's point, I want to make sure that we're going in the right direction. If this is the exploration that we want to present to the school committee, and we're just looking for some feedback, making sure we're going into the right direction. Maybe you're thinking about something else that we can include, or just kind of stop us and redirect us in another area. So I think we're kind of on track. Once again, this is a pretty big topic. The school committee has been talking about for a long time, or so it seems. And one comment that we were talking about internally was, the capital plan for the town manager cannot accommodate some of the big projects that are coming up in that Turkey Hill, electrical and HVAC, the plumbing. I mean, the amount that we're projecting, even the amount that John Launder was projecting, is possibly 2 or 3 times the amount that the town budgets for capital projects. So, it was this discussion began with John Launder, it just kind of alerting the school committee, the town manager, and the public that something has got to be done with the building. So, so I'll turn it back to the superintendent, but I think it's important that we get some feedback from the committee that we're on track. So thank you.
Yeah, I think what we were coming to is we're back to basically talking about a full-on, very expensive renovation project that isn't going to change the layout of classrooms or, change the learning environment at all. It's going to be the same building with many millions of dollars invested. And then likely you're looking at an even further time out before the community would likely be willing to invest many more millions in a new building. So that's why we started thinking about, well, what can we do? And that's when we started thinking roof, windows. Changing the windows would move them to a more energy efficient window, which would help with maintaining heating and cooling inside the building. And then again, as a backup for the heating, but also to address the concerns that the teachers have been raising for many years, for the duration of my time here, the challenge with the heat in the building. And again, the windows are not energy efficient. They let that heat come in, and once it's in and the humidity is in, it becomes a real challenge to move it out. So thinking about those things, it's a smaller total price tag. It's also something that can be done over a couple of years, even installation of split units, one floor, 1 year, another floor, another year. And the cost of those projects is not in the millions. So again, that's when we decided, we really wanted to give you all an opportunity to see some of the challenges we've been wrestling with, and get your perspectives on what you think is the path forward. What more, which avenue do you want us to go pursue? Cost estimates, etc.
Comments?
Oh,
I know
got-
mine.
I got
but
lots. I'm
I know you have lots.
chomping at the bit here, so, but I'll defer to my
Mr.
senior
Leighton?
member here.
I just wanted to add, I guess, from what Peter had mentioned too about the percentages and the projects and the codes. I just did a quick search about the codes. I couldn't find the specific Massachusetts website, but I found a website, highprofile.com, where they talk about code compliance. And just a couple highlights that I saw. In projects where there was no change of occupancy, the proposed renovation of a portion of the building that is equal to or greater than 50% of the total building area will require the highest degree of code compliance. Additionally, accessibility, the degree of accessibility compliance required to establish based on the cost of construction in relation to the full and fair cash value of the building. If the construction cost equaled or exceeded 30% of the full and fair cash value of the building, the entire building must be brought into compliance with the accessibility requirements of the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board. Upgrades to parking, building access, elevators, and restroom facilities are among the most common requirements. Also, they mentioned the following two are key points to keep in mind when determining the degree of compliance required. The value of all work completed within a 36-month period must be considered. And depending on the municipality, the assessed value of the building may or may not represent the full and fair cash value of the building. So those are just a couple things that I thought could
Thank you for
come into play.
Okay.
I think I keep talking about this too. I think I'm still concerned about our position in the queue, as
Yeah,
Carol had mentioned before. So I think that still delays my decision on it, but I think it's still important to keep talking about it, keep lining up, crossing all our T's and dotting all our I's to see what each avenue would take us and how much it's going to cost. So I think it's still important to do the work, but I don't think we're at the decision process yet.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right.
Tony, you're on deck.
So overall, my feedback on this is I'm disappointed. I thought we'd be further along at this point, but I understand that as you start peeling back the layers of the onion, you don't know what you're gonna. I don't think we're on track on this. But the good news is that our peers in this process, the building committee, they're not on track either. At least not on the track that I thought we'd be on 6 or 8 months ago. So just to review, the reason that we're doing this is because we don't have the borrowing capacity to do a major renovation or a replacement. So to get ourselves all wound up about a cost comparison to a major renovation or a replacement is a complete and utter waste of time. Okay, we need to think differently here because we're not doing that inside of the next 10 to 15 years. Mr. Cassidy asked to pick a date. I would say 2037. It's very random, but it's roughly 15, 12 and a half, 13 years. And what do we need to do for 2037? We need to have a building that functions as it does today up until 2037. That's the mission, really. It's not to have awesome classroom space like we have in this building. We're not doing that because we're not doing a replacement or a major renovation. We are preserving the life of the building until 2037. Now, in my mind, I don't come from the building trades. I come from the IT space and the IT security space, but I understand risk analysis. I come back to this all the time, right? Have we done an assessment of the heating system? What is the risk of it going down? What are our mitigation plans? What are the costs associated with it? Have we done a risk assessment of the roof? What's the likelihood that it will need to be replaced? You know, and the lifespan and the return on, and we got to run the numbers for all of these systems. Now, are we going to close the building down for 2 years? No, we're not doing that either. Can we close the building down in June and reopen it in October? Maybe. And those are scenarios that I think, you know, we need to do the homework to figure out for certain projects if we would ever need to do that. But, you know, we need a plan that we can sell to the town. Because when I mentioned the building committee, what's happening is that the building committee is building a plan that will ultimately be funded by a debt exclusion. And that debt exclusion will probably include providing for office spaces for our administration and maybe the ACE program downstairs if that all happens in Ritter. But that's about the extent of the benefits that are going to come to the schools for the building project. So the question is how do you get school support for something that kicks the can on the schools down the road for 10 to 15 years? And this is the answer. We need to provide a credible plan, a multi-year plan that could exceed 36 months, by the way, that says next year we're going to do the roof. The year after that, we're going to do the windows. The year after that, we might do splits because maybe that'll preserve the cost of, the heating system for the life expectancy of the building. We know that we can't rip the walls apart to do all the electrical or plumbing, but these are the sections of the building that, are very likely to create problems, and we need to go after that. And the footnotes need to be, and with all of this, these are the risks that we're taking because we can't shut the building down for 2 years and don't have the money. So everybody sees in black and white on town meeting floor that we're still carrying some risk associated with this. The conversation that we've had tonight, I think, scratches the surface of this. But in my view, we've got a lot of work to do. So I hope that helps.
Yep. Okay, Mr. Schoenbrini, thoughts? No thoughts over there. My thought, and I've been thinking long and hard about this, my thought is I am very worried about not having the money to do these repairs. If the school building authority, whatever they call them, are not doing windows and doors and roofs right now because they don't have the money to do it, they don't have the capacity, then that would mean in order to get started on this, the town would have to fund it. Now, in my discussions with Mr. Jeffries, as recently as Martin Luther King Day, his thought was, as long as he's able to advocate, we would get the money for repairs. But we have money that needs to be spent on unexpected stuff all over the place. My biggest fear is that Mr. Jeffries came and talked to us and sold us this bill of fixing this building. But that's his opinion. And I'm very afraid that it's not the select board's opinion. I don't know if it is, but it's not. My tendency is to always perhaps give out more information than I should. And my tendency would be that we should inform the town manager and the select board as to what our thinking is,
They have been duly informed.
not by this board.
From my discussions with the town manager, and I very briefly, this came up in the capital planning committee meeting earlier this week. The thumbnail view of this as a capital planning commitment to balance off against a debt exclusion for the town buildings. Conceptually, the town manager absolutely understands that and understands that we're going down this path. I don't know to what extent
Does the
Mr. Jeffries has
select board-
briefed the select board, but I think we should do that. But with all due respect,
No, I'm asking.
we don't have anything to talk about yet because we don't have a plan. So conceptually, we can say this is the conceptual path that we're on relative to the points that Mr. Jeffries brought to us. I think he's more or less explained that based on what I've observed in select board meetings, but I would not recommend going to the select board with the information that we have right now. I think we have an incomplete story here.
Right, and I think that that's why we brought this forward for discussion this evening. To see if the committee was on board with the notion that we would look to a roof project, a window project. And to assess your thoughts on the installation of split systems that could serve as an emergency backup for heat in classrooms should we have failures of the system, the heating system that we have currently.
So I think tactically that makes good sense.
Yes.
Right? But the problem is that we need to put that within the context of the broader building, right? So that risk of, the other systems and the costs and impacts associated with those other systems, it needs to be part of a total package. So,
Right.
So conceptually, I completely, I get the thinking around the roof and the windows and the splits, that does check off probably a third to a half of the issues with that building. But relative to the other systems and the risks that we're taking on by not addressing them,
Mhm.
or
Yes,
maybe adding something for, electric or plumbing or heating or security or whatever in the out years, I think we need, I think we need the whole picture.
oh, I don't disagree. I just, before we go down that road of putting together that whole analysis. And again, as Mr. Pusateri said, we can't really go after costs of a system replacement for heat and the electrical upgrade and the plumbing upgrade, so on and so forth, because it is going to become a bigger project. We are going to have engineers, drawings in the whole 9 yards. We know that that's going to be very, very costly before you even consider the costs associated with displacement of the school population elsewhere. Again, we wanted to come back and see if you were on a similar line of thinking around those priorities, that we can pursue some cost estimate on those, come up with a recommended sequence of which should be done first, second, and so on. And then certainly we can, go into the full explanation of why this is what we're prioritizing for the purpose of maintaining that building as is for a 10 to 15 year window of time until a real building project can occur for that school. We can put together the rationale and the reasons why, and talk about the inherent risk. I mean, we saw what happened with the building this old, this Labor Day weekend.
Yep.
when the panel for the fire alarm failed. And then, you know, that at least was a scope of a project that we could manage to within our budget and remedy rather quickly. But some other types of failures may not be remedied quite as quickly. And the risk is that, you know, potentially if some systems fail, then we're left looking again. If it's not a quick fix, if the town can't support the repair because it's too costly, okay, now we're relocating the school again. So we certainly can put something together that explains the risks that we're taking. But that from a reasonable budgetary investment in the building to, you know, make it weather tight and operational and comfort level inside the building, hot or cold, that education can continue as it is now and has been for a number of years. Again, not ideal, not what we would wish for, but that was our thinking about it. We just didn't want to pursue this work any further without checking back with you all to see if you were in agreement with this line of thinking.
I think that's definitely the concern is the age and the lifespan left on like the roof and the electrical distribution systems. So I think getting and the HVACs, I think those are some of the big ticket items that if we don't know really how much life is potentially left and what the risk is involved, that's a huge factor in the decisions. Because again, we don't want to spend that money if we don't have to keep the building up to say 2037.
So my thought, and I would ask Peter because he is the financial expert on the group here. The best way to go about getting this information. We know, I think I can speak from the conversation that the windows and the roof and the exterior doors, though that may come through capital plan with a little bit of luck this year. But those things we put on our capital plan as we go along. The engineering costs that to get the information that everybody needs also has to go on the capital plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we make a decision to put everything on the capital plan all at once. We make a decision to do this year, we do this that year. To me, if we're going to do the roof first so that we don't lose the money from the solar panel people, we put that on the plan and then with the engineering on the plan as well, so we can get the rest of these answers. As I've said many times, I feel like we are walking on thin ice with this building. And when we were at the FinCom meeting not long ago, the question was asked, well, what is your contingency plan should the fire alarm system go? There is no contingency plan. You know, we don't have one. We're not permitted to have a savings account. We can't put money away for a rainy day. That doesn't work.
It's called the state bank help. So I agree with you. I agree with you on that. I think that I think this conversation speaks for itself. The way we approach this from a capital planning perspective will be largely driven from the results of what gets reported out by Mr. Pusateri and the superintendent and Mr. Cassidy, because we will have to come up with a list of priorities. But again, my thinking on this is that this is part of a great bargain in the town, right? It's capital planning and excludable debt together, and everybody has to look at each other and agree that these are going to be priorities in the capital plan over the course of the next several years. Now, Because everybody knows I'm not satisfied with the way capital planning works, but the system is what it is right now. And we need to get the tacit agreement of the town manager and the select board and really the building committee if we're going to do this and sell this to town meeting as the municipal building plans are brought forward. So is it a multi-year plan? Yes. Do we work in engineering for a heating system in year 2? Yes. I mean, that's the way the sequence of events should work. But yeah, it should be a fully loaded plan based on the risks that are assessed. And also looking at those triggers, like I don't want to trigger that 30%, like, so we got to have an eye on that ball too. Like I'd be willing to take on more risks to avoid triggering the 30%, right? Like that's all part of the calculus that needs to go into this decision.
So can I say then we are in agreement that this is the path that we wish you to follow? Is everybody okay with that? Mr. Schoenbrini, you okay? All right.
Yeah, Carol, I just wanted to ask a question of Peter. Again, since he's the knowledgeable party about financing. In a normal plan where you have risk, you always can do things to mitigate the risk. But Carol's point about the fire alarm gets back to the only thing, one of the very few things the town is obligated to do is provide a free, appropriate public education. And so when we're calculating risk, the worst case scenario here is that the town goes into a huge amount of debt because we can't send kids to Turkey Hill and we still have to provide them a free, appropriate public education. Whether that means emergency rentals of, portable classrooms or busing them out of the city. I mean, that's not a normal risk. A business, in the business world, there's nothing that there are a few things, but very few things that you're constitutionally obligated to do that involves a huge cost. How would you put that into the plan when you're calculating risk?
Yeah, so I'm not going to answer your question directly, Tony, because I don't know the answer. But I think that the way I'm thinking as you're asking the question is that we have a fiduciary responsibility to do this calculation to the best of our ability and to figure out what we can do within the financial constraints that we are living under today in Lunenburg in 2023 with 5 and 10 year projections that we have. And we do our due diligence and we follow our fiduciary responsibilities to do that to the best of our abilities, recognizing the fact that bad things will happen and there are risks that we can't control or mitigate. And when that eventuality comes, we can look back and show the work and say, we did all the work, and go to the state or go to the federal government and say, please help us. And by the way, there's precedent for that in Lunenburg, right? We had a major oil spill 35 years ago that we had to call in the state and get an extraordinary amount of money to help us fix the problem because it was a major environmental issue as well as an issue to the infrastructure to TC Passios and the old high school. But we didn't do anything wrong. It was a human error combined with an old system. And we were able to go to the state and, beg for help, and they came through and they helped us. So, I think that it's not like we don't have backstops for catastrophic events, but I would feel a lot more comfortable going and asking for help in that lower probability scenario if I can show that we did the work in advance and thought about this holistically, which to date, I don't think we have.
Okay. All right. Does that?
I think the detailed explanation, because again, we aren't experts on why are we doing, say, an HVAC upgrade, things like that. what is the purpose? Is it a typical lifespan of those devices? Are they going to fail? Are we going to be able to get replacement parts? Definitely knowing the details and, like you said, the risk chance is important to know.
Okay. All right, if that works for everybody. We'll move on to our next facilities question. The primary AC project.
So again, I'll invite Mr. Pusateri, you have some schematics in your
Yes.
folder. Folder. We'll turn this over to you now, Mr. Pusateri, so you can explain what they're looking at.
So basically, what we have on the left is the second story or the second floor of the primary elementary school. And on the right is the first floor of the primary elementary school. So similar to the budgeting that we had done for Turkey Hill, basically for every 2 classrooms for a split system for AC and supplemental heat would require a single exterior mounted 48,000 BTU compressor with a single 24,000 BTU head in each of 2 classrooms. So we budgeted $20,000 per 2 classrooms at Turkey Hill, based on the fact that the systems would be mounted right on the roof above the classrooms, and would be a very minimal run for the mechanical systems. So the difference between the installation projected at Turkey Hill versus primary elementary school is we do not have a lot of flat roof on the building. So anywhere you see a green rectangle, that would basically comprise of the 48,000 BTU compressor. And then each line running from that would be the 2 classrooms that each 48,000 BTU compressor would be supplying a 24,000 BTU head for each classroom. So on the top left of the second floor, we do have a small flat roof right outside the gym. So that installation would be on that flat roof, and it would supply 2 classrooms and 2 offices. And then on the bottom left side of the second floor, we do have another section of flat roof where currently the air handler units or rooftop units for the school are located. And we could install 3 48,000 BTU condensers, compressors, and supply that to 6 other classrooms. All the other green rectangles that you see, whether it's supplying the first floor or the second floor, our only option is to mount those either on the side of the building or on the ground. So based on that, we're looking at if we're going to provide the cooling and supplemental heating for all the classrooms is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 double units, and then 1 single unit. There's a classroom on the right. I think it's A151. I can't see it on my screen. So the projected cost for this installation would be between $25,000 and $27,000 per 2 classrooms. Again, that's based on the lengths of the mechanical and the electrical runs. You can see throughout the floor plan any text that has been highlighted in red and the arrows indicate the locations of the electrical rooms that we have and how many spare circuits that we have available. So there aren't any concerns at all about the impact on the electrical capacity of the primary by adding all these systems. We do have a mechanical contractor coming in next week to look at this and provide pricing. And this would be the same contractor that provided the pricing for the solutions that we proposed at Turkey Hill. So I'm confident that the $25,000 to $27,000 per 2 classrooms. And I don't have the math in front of me, but I do not see that cost exceeding that, if at all. Yeah, I'm hoping I'm more closer to 25 than 27,000.
What was the original capital appropriation?
227 or $226,000, I think, Peter.
Well, I think
I think it was more than that.
No, Mr. Cassidy, you might need to verify. Wasn't it in the ballpark of 232,000?
Yes,
There's a 2 to 2 to 3 in there somewhere.
it was I was gonna say it was 236. But let me see if I can verify that while the discussion continues.
So.
So
forgive
that would be,
my lack of math skills here.
that would be 16 and a half classrooms, or 17 classrooms that we would be able to do with that budget number. If I'm looking at $27,000 per 2 classrooms, and I get 8.7. So we could do 16 classrooms and then a single classroom, which would be, I think, A151 on the first floor.
And
So
how many
it'd
classrooms?
be a situation where, you know, obviously, the intent would be to cover the second floor initially, obviously because heat rises, and then, you know, pick and choose what we do on the first floor, or do we increase the capital article to accommodate the entire facility?
It was, if I may just interject, it was 238,000
Okay.
under the capital plan for this year.
And my scan of this is that we're looking at 26 or 28 total classrooms.
I'm not sure the number. I look back at the floor plan. I think it was 27, maybe 25 or 27, Peter.
Okay. And you're gonna have real cost estimates on this pretty quick?
Not pretty quick. They're planning on coming out next week. It's going to take them a couple weeks to turn this around.
They were originally supposed to be out last week. And then if something happened and they weren't out last week.
Dakin is a company that's been doing a lot of mechanical work for the school systems for years. So that's how I've engaged is and getting pricing for us.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Pusateri about this project?
What's your thinking in terms of the decision making on this? I mean, obviously, we're not getting air conditioning to the building, even with the full plan, which would cost us substantially more than $238,000. In my mind, it's good progress in that direction to address some fraction of the issues that were brought forth in the capital plan last year. Like, I would feel okay voting to support it based on the rough numbers that we've had here. It would be substantially higher, I think I'd reconsider that. I mean, the other thing that's at play here is that this is currently unexpended capital, that we're in a bad capital year.
Right.
Right now, we could turn this back to the town manager and say, apply it to the fire, the fire system at the at Turkey Hill. Right, so and I think we need to have a pretty good idea of that within a month. That decision, but I just wanted to kind of share my logic in terms.
Well, I think this carries out merely the intent of the original article. It does not do, as Mr. Jeffries said, deal with the systems problem in the upstairs of the primary building. We're not going to be cooling down the very hot areas because of those open windows up there. That's not going to happen. But I would like to see this done if it can be done. But that's just my thought, because that is the spirit of that initial article. And if we offer not to do it, who knows if they're going to take the money and use it for something else.
Well, the next is, so we'll get into capital plan later on, but the next item on the capital plan that isn't funded is the fire alarm system at the, and this is unexpended capital. So it
should
almost definitely go to that. Just one other question, Mr. Pusateri, there, when we first started talking about splits, there was a lot of concern about the facade of the building and what that's going to do. Do you have an idea of, like, are we going to be able to mitigate turning this into an ugly building?
Yes, but you're still going to have vertical runs in some areas outside the building. So if you look at the plan, Peter, I've done as much as I can to mitigate installing these systems outside courtyards where they're visible from the street. I know there's a couple existing systems already visible on the outside of the building, one in the courtyard, not the courtyard, but as you're entering the front of the building on your left, and then one out by the library.
Yeah,
so
the
all the other systems, I've tried to keep in the courtyard and on the first floor there on the left side of the library, which would probably be the west side or south side. I'm not sure which way 2A runs, but
runs east-west.
So it'd be on the west side. So yes, you would see some of it, but there are options as far as what you would cover the mechanical and electrical systems in going up the other sides of the building. And it's not just, a bright white that looks like you've got racing stripes up and down your building. And, worst case scenario is if that's all we have, then, we paint them Georgia brick color so they don't stand out as much.
So the excuse me for interrupting, the classrooms that I'm most concerned about in terms of the facade of the building as I look at it is the east side of the building and the second story classrooms in that north facing wing. So as you're looking from, let's say, the entrance or the parking lot in front of the main entrance, those second story classrooms right above that main entrance, if you were running vertical lines up to those classrooms, it would be really ugly. I see that you've got compressors on the back side of the building on that flat roof. So your plan, I'm assuming, is to avoid having to make those runs up the front of the building on that side?
Well, I can't exceed 92 feet of total run on the refrigeration piping.
Okay.
So there's no way to feed the classrooms on the front of the building from the back of the building.
You can't. Okay.
No, the distance it exceeds the maximum length of the mechanical runs, Peter.
Okay.
I mean, I've put all that into thought, and that's where we are. If you look at the second floor of the building, the bottom right you'll see, which looks like a flat roof, almost like a corridor. There is a flat roof on the second floor, but it's only about 5.5, 6 feet wide. And I cannot put any mechanical systems on that roof because there's no fall protection. And then we would have to put yellow guardrails up on both sides, and you would see those forever. So.
Okay. And I may take this offline with you, Mr. Pusateri, just to
Sure.
get clarification at some point. I'm particularly interested in what's going on the flat roof behind the gymnasium and how that's feeding second floor classrooms.
It's, when you look out the windows in that hallway, Peter, it's only about a 4-foot drop.
Yeah,
So.
but then you're going over the corridor to do that, or how's that?
One of them, yes, it would, when you walk in that corridor, it's the metal roof that's exposed, but the piping would be insulated in white and would be pretty much hidden, but you know, whether it's Turkey Hill or Primary, any day you want to come by, do a walkthrough.
Yep.
We have
Okay.
more than to accommodate it.
All right, good. Thank you.
Next week would be good without, kids running around.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Any other questions on the AC?
No, I think it's important to do. And there's always going to be concerns about this year's capital plan or next year's capital plan. So I think we use the funding if it's feasible.
Okay. Then I guess we move on to FY24 budget update.
I'll invite Mr. Cassidy for the conversation.
Good evening, everyone. Mike Cassidy, Business Manager. Just providing a brief update tonight on the FY24 budget. 4 weeks from tonight, the final recommended budget from the superintendent of schools will be presented to the school committee for your review and approval. So that's 4 weeks from tonight. In 2 weeks will be is the a session, a question and answer session regarding any questions around the FY24 budget. So we've only got a few more weeks, and we still have a few unknowns. And one thing that it looks like is that we have some support from the town manager. At this time, she's looking at supporting the 3.1% increase as it stands. As the superintendent and I talked about, we are, it's our intent to come in as close to 2.5% as possible. So as the insurance is known, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, and some of the other unknowns in our budget are defined, that amount may be reduced on the town side. And the budget is kind of built up for those unknowns. So that will affect the town budget, and it'll affect ours once those numbers are defined. And once again, we are really waiting for the health insurance amount to come through, so we can share that information with the town manager. And hopefully there's a preview of the recommended budget at the next school committee meeting, if we get that number. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Burnham. Anything else you would like to add?
There really isn't much else to add. We still don't have anything definitive.
Okay, well, we thank you for your update.
Just wanted to note, I had registered some questions when the budget was first presented about the IT portion of the budget, and There'll be a meeting tomorrow morning. I believe we're still scheduled with Suzer IT to resolve some of the questions that I have, and hopefully we can close that out.
All right. Sounds good. All set, Mr. Schoenbrini? Okay,
Good, thank you.
thank you. Under new business, we had a letter from the LEA. And it states, the Lunenburg Education Association is requesting to open the stipend portion of our collective bargaining agreement with the Lunenburg School Committee. Our goal in opening this portion of the contract is to review the current list of stipends in order to add or delete programs that are no longer running, or those that may have been running but are not reflected on the list. Although discussion around stipends may involve the stipend amounts associated with certain programs joining the list, we are not seeking to negotiate new stipend levels or categories or amounts for the current programs. Thank you for your consideration. Lisa LeBlanc, LEA President. So it seems to me they just want to clean up the list. And in order to do that, we have to reopen that portion of the contract. I have no problem with it. I don't know if anybody else does. Peter?
So I'm inclined to recuse myself from this, but
Yes,
I have
good idea.
I have a structural question.
Okay,
When we add stipended positions, as we have pretty regularly over the course of the last several months. I recall we did one pretty recently, for a social media
yes.
stipend. Is that reflected in the contract, or do we add that to our schedule and then that gets updated later into the contract, or what are the mechanics of that?
There's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So I'll invite Mr. Cassidy to this conversation. Sometimes there might be some temporary situation that we would be looking to create a stipended position for, or we might be piloting a new model of something. As an example, we piloted a new model of the mentor program. We might introduce something, test it out. It doesn't work. We're going to re-examine it. We wouldn't be in a hurry to try to introduce those into the contract. But there are others that are longstanding. As an example, we have a mentor program coordinator in the district. Once upon a time, that was covered as a master teacher project every year. We need to have a mentor program coordinator. We have to have a mentor program. It doesn't make sense that it would be an annual, oh, I'm going to suggest that this is my project. That is an example of
They
a
haven't even
long
done the logo yet. They want me to stay on.
I thought she was texting you when they were doing the logo.
or Mr. Pusateri has to stay on for his logo. He thought he was all done. So as an example, that's a long-standing position that we would want to make sure we put onto the stipended list. We're reassessing the model, as I said that we would when I first introduced it. The model of a K-8 coordinator for curriculum leadership, because there are inherent challenges with that structure, as I knew there would be. So we're looking to reimagine that. I don't know that we'll get that figured out in time to put it in this iteration of any changes with that, but it might be something that we take a look at when we open up negotiations for the full contract, because we will have had an opportunity to pilot a different model for curriculum leadership in the district. Mr. Cassidy, you live in this world on a regular basis. I think there are some assistant coach positions probably that aren't specified in the list that we have had, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if you have any additional thoughts to add.
I think you did a good job. I'll just say that stipends come and go. I mean, we had a COVID coordinator that has come and gone. You know, sometimes we just kind of do some hiring to gap fill until we figure out who's going to do it. I know LEA is, I am going to be, I suspect, I hate to say this publicly, but they'll probably agree. I mean, they will be advocating for some of those stipends that are student related, that are really school based, to make sure that they're appropriately represented in their contract. So I think that's one of the things that they'll likely be looking for. So, you know, the social media, some of the other administrative support stipends will not be in their contract. There's really no intent for them to go in the contract. That's all I have to say, Dr. Burnham.
Okay.
All right.
I am going to recuse myself from this one.
So I guess my initial thought is I have no concerns. I think a lot of different school committees could take it different ways and just wait till the next start of negotiations. But I feel like this would be a good olive branch. We're working together. This is not a big ask. That's something that we could do. So I think we should do it. I think it just helps with that relationship in the school committee and the teachers association.
Additionally, this would be something that would occupy negotiation meeting time when we do enter into that process.
Right.
If we can resolve this and clean this up now, then those meetings can focus on other aspects of the negotiation.
Well, I think also in the future that we try to do this as best we can. It's definitely difficult because you only do it every, say, 3 years, but it's definitely something we can keep an eye on next negotiations as well as stipends change.
So then I would need a motion to grant the LEA's request to open the stipended portion of the contract for the express reasons that were stated in the letter.
So moved.
And can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much. And a roll call vote.
Mr. Schoenbrini,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Archambeau,
Yes.
and Mr. Beardmore has left the table, but he has already indicated that he would be abstaining from this vote.
All right.
Thank
So-
you.
Thank you. So the facilities logo. So Mr. Pusateri, thank you for hanging in there.
You're welcome.
And Mr. Pusateri had spoken to me about this as well as the superintendent. And he came up with a very clever looking logo. So do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Steve Pusateri, Facilities Director. So in my previous positions as a facilities manager in different companies, I've always tried to kind of have the facilities group with their own identity. So any company that I've worked at that has had any type of mascot, I've gotten permission from whoever to put a hammer in said mascot's hand. Tony, I love your reaction.
So that wasn't very deliberative.
So I've gone on, I've done a search for Lunenburg Blue Knights, and I've seen 2 or 3 different logos used as the official mascot, different athletic associations and so forth. So I have to give kudos to my middle daughter, Megan, who is a graphic designer, who has done all my hammer work. So I found this picture online with a knight with a blue cape and the headdress and asked her to, you know, make it facility. So she turned the sword into a hammer. And the what I'd like to do is be able to use this image on any new equipment or vehicles that we get at the school department, and any going forward with any of the shirts and so forth that we have made every year for the facilities and maintenance crews and custodians. So, you know, it kind of stands out, and, you know, the Hammer facilities doing the work. So you know, I would like to have this approved by the school committee to allow the facilities group to be able to use this on their shirts, and to be able to use this on any new vehicles that we get, instead of you know, saying Town of Lunenburg. It says Lunenburg Schools Facilities, and, you know, there's the blue knight with a hammer in his hand. So, you know, it may be on a business card or two, but you know, outside of that, that's really all I'm looking to do. And again, just you know, let us stand out with the facilities group. This is what we do, and you know, just kind of, you know, not separate ourselves, but you know, this is who we are. And you know, it's kind of nice. It gives everyone a sense of being, and you know, and camaraderie within their own group. And, you know, for me, it's a morale builder. I like the idea. And again, you know, I've always done it where I can. So, you know, that's what I'm requesting today, for the approval from the school committee to be able to use this for the facilities maintenance and custodial personnel and vehicles moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, Mr. Pusateri? Mr. Beardmore?
Mr. Pusateri, I appreciate your efforts around team building and morale and esprit de corps and all the other appropriate language. I think you're an excellent leader, and I think that this initiative is good evidence of that sort of initiative. That being said, I'm inclined to not support this. And my reasoning on it is that the school committee a few years ago went through the effort of standardizing on a Blue Knight logo, which, to your point earlier, we do not have 100% compliance on, but it is a lot better now than it was 2 or 3 years ago, because the school committee went through the effort of arriving at a design and approving a single Blue Knight logo to be used. And I come from a background in marketing and brand development, and I believe strongly in brand discipline. And I think that this is a slippery slope that will be counterproductive to a lot of different initiatives that are likely to come once people see some modification of the Blue Knight logo. And so with that in mind, I'm not inclined to support this.
Mr. Leighton, your thoughts?
I would tend to agree with Mr. Beardmore that, again, you do want a consistent logo. I was contemplating the hammer, whether go with the hammer or the sword too. But then after hearing Mr. Beardmore, maybe it makes sense to, again, be consistent with the sword and the actual specific logo.
And I have to admit, not knowing what the specific logo looks like, as I don't run into it all that often, to be honest. Mr. Schoenbrini, your thought?
So obviously I really like the design. And I hear Peter's concern, and I think that's a really good concern. The one thing that I will tell you is when I was in college for 3 of the 4 years, I worked at my local school district's facilities group. And there were a lot of times when people needed us to do work, and because we didn't have a continuous roster, like they hired a bunch of people in for the summer, they would often not know that I was one of the people that they could go to. And if there was a logo that was conceptually similar, but specific to the facilities group, it might help people figure out who those people are, and it might help them get the assistance they need quicker. And I think about this in the context of my day job. I go to court every day, and if you wear a suit, a tie, and you stand in certain places, people assume you're a lawyer, and they'll ask me questions, even though I'm not their lawyer or they don't know which side I'm on. They'll still ask me, like, which court do I go to? And it's because there's that recognition that I do a certain job. And I think that this logo would help that. And given the job they do, sometimes it's pretty important to be able to find that person quickly. So I like the logo, and I like the idea of having a separate logo, but I hear Peter's concern, so I'm not sure which way I would vote.
So a couple of counterpoints to that. Mr. Scalabrini, you practice in the state of New Hampshire, and I would venture to guess that in the court system in New Hampshire, nobody has bastardized the state seal of the state of New Hampshire. That is not necessarily the level of reverence that I would put on the Blue Knight logo. But I think that, there's a level of uniformity that I think that, again, this committee went through the effort several years ago of standardizing a Blue Knight logo. And this would undermine that work that this committee did. It's perfectly within our purview to do that, but I'm not sure that I see the need to do that. The other point that I would make here is that since that logo was adopted, the PTO has gotten behind this. They were behind it. They were here several months ago and requested permission to print through a fundraiser to print clothing with the logo on it. Many of the sports teams have adopted that logo. Actually, they all have adopted that logo as part of their moniker for their teams. There are other logos such as Lunenburg football, which does not represent the Blue Knight, but represents a football, and there's a soccer ball version of it, and so on and so forth for various sports. But the Blue Knight is, by the edict of this committee, and again, it hasn't been 100% followed, but by edict of this committee is a single image. I think that this invites exactly what the committee intended to correct 3 or 4 years ago, which is we had a sundry of Blue Knight logos and no standardization whatsoever. And anybody who wanted to make a Blue Knight could do it. And it didn't look great when you were trying to build esprit de corps and school spirit and standing behind something that was singular.
So, should we take a vote then on whether or not? It was just a discussion, so we're not voting on it, okay. I don't know what to say on this one.
So
Because I like the idea. And what if he used the regular Blue Knight and somehow the regular one and put a hammer somehow? Is that the same problem?
Well, that's what I was thinking, not necessarily have them hold the hammer, but maybe there's a hammer on the side or other tools that you want to do this,
His head or something?
potentially on the left.
So I
Right.
would have a problem with a separate logo or the Blue Knight logo and facilities and, you can designate a department all you want through text.
And maybe it's not the specific Blue Knight logo, but
Could be something else.
other
Could be,
just additional logos.
could be facilities, but not be a Blue Knight.
Yeah.
I think of how you could do that with that.
I think my thought is it gives Mr. Pusateri some direction on potential revisions.
But if, the only reason why I went online looking for a different Blue Knight is because the one that, the main one at the school uses, there wasn't an opportunity to put a hammer in the Blue Knight's hand. So, I mean, I would definitely, you know, would still use the existing Blue Knight logo and just put, you know, same thing, Lunenburg Schools facilities, and just keep the same logo. If, you know, wouldn't be changing the logo at all. Because of, you know, if I just take the existing logo, then put a hammer in it, Pete, we get back to the same issue then, with other groups wanting to do the same thing. So if I'm consistent with the logo and just, you know, put Lunenburg Schools facilities on it, it still, you know, identifies us as facilities.
Okay. Great picture, though.
Yeah.
I do like the
Design.
hammer.
Good work.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Pusateri. Now you're clear to go.
Thank you for your time, everybody. Have a good night.
Night. You can relight that cigar.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next topic is delegation topics for discussion. I have a laundry list that I've been gathering. So I'm going to read my laundry list. And then if because the point of this is that we're meeting with the legislators on March 7th and to discuss things. It's 90 minutes and it is us and FinCom and the select board. So I don't know how much conversation time we're actually going to get in that 90 minutes, but this is my laundry list and anybody can jump in. Sidewalks on 2A. We can't do them ourselves. The town has to get permission from the state or whatever. So some conversation on that. The sunsetting of ESSER funds, but the need is still there. The SOA inflation rate that I talked about earlier. Transportation reimbursement. The state is supposed to reimburse municipalities and for homeless people, but they don't do that. So I know that they do some reimbursement for transportation for regional districts, but according to what I heard online the other day with MASC, they said that municipalities are supposed to be reimbursed to a certain extent, and that doesn't happen. Out of district special ed costs that have risen 14%, but the town reimbursement remains the same. Is there anything they can do about that? The MSBA with no renovation reimbursement, what are we supposed to do about that? And do we ask for earmarks for the windows of the roof or something? Or the town probably has a laundry list themselves, the earmarks. So those were my issues that I was thinking of. So have at it.
So I would say on your earmarks list too, I would say like, throw it all out there, whatever, like if we can get earmarks for, we should express what we need, what our projects are and what we're looking for. So if things come up, they can get those earmarks. The other one I had was really connected to the SOA, the Student Opportunity Act, but also the Millionaire's Tax. So I think we should make that connection that we understand that Student Opportunity Act was for the inner city kids and that getting those schools additional funding, you know, Worcester and Boston, Springfield, but that the Millionaire's Tax, we expect with transportation and education that all schools are going to be getting more funding for education to help, especially with losing ESSER funds. And I think in general, like that overview, almost introduction is we want to make sure that the state is not increasing unfunded mandate, that we're actually funding all mandates on education, and even reaching out to us when education bills come up to get your opinion, so we can say, well, is this going to be funded? How is this going to be funded? So those are my concerns that you didn't necessarily list.
Okay. All right, anybody else jumping in?
I would say top priority in my mind is the ESSER sunset in terms of the effect that that's going to have
Mhm.
on us and our budget. And our staffing. And then behind that is, the continual issue around Chapter 70 and inflation, those kinds of things behind just general state aid. The other thing that I would, in terms of the earmarks actually came up in the capital planning committee meeting as well, relative to the fire alarm. And the feedback from the town manager is that they're typically looking for 50K or 100K
No,
thresholds
yeah.
for earmarks. So, we've got a lot of things on our list that vastly exceed that number. So it may, just thinking in terms, I'm happy to throw them out there, but just in terms of economizing our limited time, it may be worth doing some things in writing and doing some things verbally.
Yeah.
The other thing that just, editorial comment, and this is a conversation that I think that should be had with the town manager and Mr. Jeffries, is this is a very limited amount of time. And I suspect that there's a town issue that is going to be talked about that could easily suck all of the oxygen out of the room. And I don't want that to happen, because that is certainly not the only issue that Lunenburg is facing right now. And whatever we can do to avoid that, to make sure that our issues do surface, I would appreciate.
I can talk to the chair. Mr. Schoenbrini, any thoughts?
Just school lunches.
Oh, yeah, I've left that on. Yep.
Yeah.
See my laundry.
Are we
list
allowed
was-
to attend the meeting, Carol?
Yes, it is going to be a meeting. So I will call our meeting to order. Evan will call the finance committee to order, and Michael Ray will call the select board to order. The three chairs are going to be sitting on the stage, but everybody else will be there.
When is it?
March 7th.
At what time?
The select board meeting is at 7. What time this appears on their agenda, I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay. If that's all, we'll keep going. Reports, committee reports. Do you have a committee report?
Capital planning met on Monday. We reviewed the entire list of the town manager's recommendation for the capital plan. There were some items that changed, that she changed the order of prioritization. Some items moved up, on our list. Nothing was moved down substantially. The one item that moved most substantially, but probably will be out of the window of funding anyway, is the proposed parking lot for the adult activity center. That moved up substantially. But again, right now, the plan is to fund 6 items.
Right.
So we'll see where we land after estimates come in for what's needed to move free cash to overlay to pay for the tax debacle. So none of this is going to be clear, I don't think, until mid to late April. So we'll just hope for the best.
Okay. Mr. Leighton?
Turkey Hill met on February 9th. There were enjoying their fun Fridays. The students brought their sleds for recess. They also did cultural celebrations to celebrate different cultures during the holidays. After school music had their signups. They sent home the iReady mid-year assessments. The Tiger presentations were planned for the end of March. There were Girls on the Run was a success. They plan on doing it again in the spring. Also, the after school enrichment was a success. They had 89 students sign up. They're trying to expand in the spring. It was very popular. The STEM night is March 16th. The math night is to be announced. And we talked about the iReady growth that the school committee already talked about, and they're trying to again incorporate more positive reinforcements on the bus and doing bus shout outs as a reward system to again encourage good behavior on the bus. And that was it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Quick question, came up in a conversation literally today, the Tiger program. Are we funding that, or is that being funded through, I think at one point it was funded through the Mackey grant, or do we know how that's being funded?
It might be the student activities.
Yes, I think so.
I'm not sure.
It's not urgent that I get that.
We can find out and follow up, but I suspect that it might be student activities.
Okay, there was some private fundraising a number of years ago associated with some, I think the Mackey family and the Rogers family. And I don't know if any of that funding is left or if that's being utilized, but it came up in conversation. I'd like to know.
Okay. Mr. Schoenbrini, any committee reports?
So the policy committee went through and did a run through on the transportation policy and the food safety policy. We also met with representatives from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, and they had proposed a plan to rewrite all of our policies for us and host them on their own website. We had questions from them. Unfortunately, after that, I had to get off the phone. Then in the PTO, they met on Monday, and the Special Someone Dance was a big success. They sold out, and in fact, the biggest complaint was that they sold out too quickly. They had a lot of really positive feedback, and they were very grateful, especially to the staff that helped clean up and the parents that helped clean up. The next event that they have is the Super Mario movie premiere. It's going to be on Saturday morning. I think it's April 7th or 8th, whichever that one of those is a Saturday. And the plan is to have I think they've set the prices, and they are looking at multiple theaters. Given the response to the Special Someone Dance, they are going to have more than one theater, and they've already made arrangements with Cinema World in Fitchburg. And then they started doing more intense planning for the Hollis Hills event, and one of they have some commitments on raffle items, and they're looking for people to be willing to do events. They're also looking for local craftsmen who would like to get their name out, would be willing to donate items so that they could get some free advertising. And there was exploration of having, if there is a band that exists or multiple bands that exist at the high school, maybe having them play, if that was something that was possible, given the Lunan, or given Hollis Hills. The last thing that they were working on is another way to raise a little bit more money. Last year they did a lemonade, and you could purchase it in a Blue Knights cup. And this year they are contemplating doing that, or maybe ice cream and a Blue Knights miniature novelty sized baseball cap, or a special menu item, which as a dad, I really appreciate the dad pun. It would be called the Lunenburger, if that is possible. So they have a lot of stuff planned, and all of the stuff that they have done has been really successful, and they all work really well together. So they're doing a great job.
Okay, thank you. And Finance Committee met on the 9th of February. The town manager talked about preparation for the FY24 budget, that there was a lot of unknowns between the health insurance and obviously the tax issue. They had to carry over at least $189,000 in snow removal because they're using contractors because the dump trucks don't work. And the capital plan, she said that, I don't know that I got this right, so I could not be talking correctly, so correct me if I'm wrong. The capital plan, the ambulance and the 2 trucks for the DPW, she was looking at ARPA funds. She's proposing to get them from ARPA funds, but she could take it out of stabilization as well. But it's going to be discussed at the Tuesday select board meeting next week. So.
Special purpose stabilization.
Oh,
But other
okay.
than that, I think you nailed it.
Oh, well, that's not bad then. The overlay amount needed for tax abatements is yet to be determined, and she is planning for a worst case scenario. But Mr. Waters gave a presentation on how Proposition 2.5 works. So anybody that doesn't understand how that works, it would be a really good idea to watch it because it is a confusing thing. And if you don't know how it works, you figure your taxes just go up 2.5%, but that is not how it works. So it would be a good thing to watch. And their next meeting is tomorrow on Thursday, and the town manager is supposed to present her budget. So that is what I have. If there are no other reports, topics for future discussions. Oh, public comment. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any public comments to be had? I am seeing none from the board. No one has anything else to say.
I just have one really quick comment. In the last week, I've attended a track meet and 2 basketball games. And I have to say that the sportsmanship exhibited by Lunenburg athletes and coaches is second to none. And in some cases, substantially better than that of our competitors. I always feel good when I walk out of a basketball game, even like the one that we lost last night, because of the way our student athletes and coaches handle themselves.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you for making that comment. So topics for future discussion. I have bullying and I have the equity report question and answer. Anything else besides all the other things we have to do? The budget question and answer next time. And there's more stuff we always have to do. Have anything else? Nothing from Tony? All right, if there's nothing else, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 9:43 PM.
Second.
All those in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Schoenbrini,
Yes.
Mr. Beardmore,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Ashambo.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.